Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, June 19, 2024. Celebrations on this Juneteenth federal holiday, marking the day in 1865 when the last held African-American slaves in Texas learned the Civil War was over and they were free. Coming up, we'll hear from President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris and Senator John Cornyn of Texas, plus Steve Williams, president of the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation. Congressman Bob Good of Virginia says the results of Tuesday's Republican primary election are too close to call, and he thinks he still can prevail. The challenger, John McGuire, a state senator, has already declared victory and does lead a bit at this point. Provisional and mail-in ballots are still to be counted. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra talks about Latino and immigrant issues at the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials Conference in Las Vegas. Before the U.S. Senate went out for today's holiday, they passed a bill designed to encourage the nuclear energy industry. We'll hear from a supporter and an opponent. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, on a congressional delegation to meet with the Tibetan spiritual leader Dalai Lama in India, criticizes Chinese repression of Tibet and says that Dalai Lama will be remembered long after Chinese President Xi Jinping is forgotten. Tensions rise between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the United Nations Commission concludes that Israel committed war crimes fighting Hamas in Gaza. And tributes coming in for Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Willie Mays, who has passed away. We'll hear from former President Barack Obama awarding Mays the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015. And we start with the Juneteenth federal holiday, commemorating this day in 1865 when Union soldiers reached Galveston, Texas, announcing the Civil War was over and all enslaved people in the state, an estimated 250,000, were free under the Emancipation Proclamation signed by President Lincoln 2 years earlier. Vice President Kamala Harris posting on X today, "On Juneteenth, we join generations of loved ones to celebrate Black excellence, resilience, and resistance, and to remember our nation's history in full. As we celebrate together, we are reminded of America's promise, freedom, liberty, and opportunity, not for some, but for all." Vice President Harris attended a Juneteenth block party in Atlanta on Tuesday, during which she called on everyone to make the holiday a day of action, especially registering to vote.
And I want to wish everybody a happy Juneteenth. So when I was in the United States Senate, I was very proud to be a sponsor of the legislation that made Juneteenth a holiday. And when I think about what we know, and folks in Atlanta and so many parts of our country have traditions, long-standing traditions, of how to celebrate Juneteenth and what it means. But in particular, when we think about what's at stake in our country right now, in the context of those who would deny our history, who would have us erase history, who would try to rewrite our history. In this year of our Lord 2024, those who are banning books. We know that as we celebrate this, the most recent, the newest federal holiday in America, that it is incumbent on all of us in our celebration to dedicate ourselves to knowing our history, to dedicating ourselves to what must not be repeated about our history, knowing we can never take any of the gains we have made for granted unless we are vigilant in protecting fundamental freedoms. And that's how I know we think about Juneteenth. I have issued a call to action. I have actually asked that on Juneteenth, in the many ways that we have traditionally celebrated it, now that it is a federal holiday, let's also incorporate into our tradition, our new traditions, that we will think of Juneteenth of a day for us to have a call to action to register folks to vote. So let that now, as we create traditions on top of those that have existed, think of Juneteenth as our call to action to register folks to vote. Because after all, what we know is so much about our history has been about those that would try and deny us our rights, and how we must be proactive and exercise self-determination to make real our power and the promise of America. And one of the most significant ways in election time that we do that is to vote. An election that is going to determine the next generation or many of our country is happening in 140 days. In 140 days. And it is so important that we remind people of their power at this very moment, their power of their voice through their vote.
Vice President Kamala Harris at a Juneteenth block party in Atlanta on Tuesday, ahead of today, June 19th, the Juneteenth federal holiday. On Monday, President Joe Biden spoke at a Juneteenth concert on the White House lawn.
I was proud to have made Juneteenth a federal holiday. And I'm grateful to the members of Congress who are here today who helped make it possible. I'm not going to start to name them because I'll miss somebody. But it wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a statement of fact. It was about a statement of faith. It was testimony of a testament to the resilience of generations of black Americans who kept their eyes set on the nation's North Star. That North Star was the idea that we're all created equal in the image of God and deserve to be treated equally throughout our lives. While we've never lived up to it, we've never fully walked away from it either. That's because of you and generations before you who led the march from slavery to freedom toward more than a perfect union. But let's be clear, they're old ghosts in new garments trying to take us back. Well, there are. Taking away your freedoms, making it harder for black people to vote or have your vote counted. Closing doors of opportunity, attacking the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you can believe it, banning books about black experiences, trying to erase and rewrite history. Our history is not just about the past, it's about our present and our future. It's whether that future is the future for all of us, not just for some of us. Folks, black history is American history. That's why Kamala and I and our administration will always uplift it and protect it.
President Joe Biden at a Juneteenth holiday concert on Monday outside the White House. President Biden, a Democrat, is running for re-election. The campaign of his expected Republican opponent, former President Donald Trump, put out a statement today from Janiyah Thomas, the campaign's director of black media, that reads, "All slaves are free." This was the cry that rang out on June 19th, 1865. The principle of freedom has always been at the foundation of the Republican Party. Today we reflect on how far we have come as a nation and remember that light will always triumph over darkness. With President Trump's leadership, our party will continue to advance the American dream for all people. And the Biden-Harris campaign put out a statement that reads in part, "Juneteenth is about celebrating our history, yet Donald Trump thinks so little of black voters that he thinks we'll forget this. From embracing white supremacists to calling for the death penalty for the innocent Central Park Five and promoting racist conspiracies about Barack Obama, racism is the single through line of Trump's life and career." Senator John Cornyn, Republican from Texas, talked about the Juneteenth holiday on the Senate floor on Tuesday.
In 1979, Texas was the first of what would become many states to proclaim the day Juneteenth as an official state holiday. 1979. Every year on June 19th, you'll find parades, concerts, church picnics, family barbecues, and countless other Juneteenth events throughout the state. I've joined a number of those Juneteenth celebrations over the years, but the one in 2021 in Galveston, the birthplace of Juneteenth, will always stand out as one of my favorites. Just 2 days before that celebration, a bill I authored with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee was signed into law, officially establishing Juneteenth as a national holiday, not just a state holiday, a national holiday. This marked the culmination of many years of hard work by Juneteenth advocates in Texas, and it was an honor to celebrate with many of those advocates in Galveston, exactly 156 years after Major General Gordon Granger and his troops arrived there. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the most tenacious advocate for the Juneteenth holiday, my friend Miss Opal Lee, who's widely known as the grandmother of Juneteenth. Miss Opal was driven from her Fort Worth home by a racist mob at the tender age of 12 years. Rather than turn that tragedy into hate, she made it her life's work to recognize the 2.5 years it took the news of the Emancipation Proclamation to reach Texas by walking 2.5 miles in different areas of the country to build awareness. Even though Juneteenth is now a national holiday, Ms. Opal, at the tender age of 97, still walks 2.5 miles in the Texas heat. She'll do that tomorrow to underscore the importance of continuing to strive for a more perfect union. Juneteenth National Independence Day would not have been possible without her perseverance and humility, and I hope she understands and appreciates the importance of her work. By making Juneteenth a national holiday, we have ensured that the history and significance of this day will not be relegated to footnotes in history books. Instead, it will preserve the history of Juneteenth for generations to come and serve as a reminder of the hard-fought struggle for freedom and reconciliation. This holiday gives us the opportunity to confront the flaws in our past, to honor the progress that we made, and to resolve to continue to work together for a brighter future. I appreciate the hard work and dedication of those who made Juneteenth National Independence Day possible, and I wish everyone a happy Juneteenth.
Senator John Cornyn, Republican from Texas, on the Senate floor on Tuesday. The Senate is not in session today for the holiday. An article from The Guardian: at least 30 states, including most recently Rhode Island and Kentucky and the District of Columbia, recognized Juneteenth as an official public holiday, according to the Pew Research Center. Yet as the number of states to legally declare Juneteenth a holiday rises, other states continue to cling to holidays that honor the Confederacy. 10 states, all in the American South, have at least one day commemorating the Confederacy, according to Axios, and 6 former Confederate states do not officially recognize Juneteenth: Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina, and North Carolina. That article from The Guardian. A parade held on the White House Ellipse in Washington, D.C. today at a program hosted by the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation. The group's president is Steve Williams.
All things Juneteenth. All things Juneteenth.
All things Juneteenth.
All things Juneteenth.
All things Juneteenth.
We say all things Juneteenth in America because freedom in America for everybody else started with Juneteenth. Before there was civil rights, women's rights, human rights, gay rights, there was Juneteenth. Juneteenth led the way for everybody and led everybody for everything, right? And so we come today, each day, each year to celebrate this, the celebration of freedom. Juneteenth adds balance to the celebration of freedom. It is not a choice whether the 4th of July or Juneteenth. It is, as in the words of our founder, Reverend Ronald B. Myers, Senior MD, the 4th of July freed the land, Juneteenth freed the people. The 4th of July freed the land from the tyranny of Britain. Juneteenth freed the people from the tyranny of slavery. Not only those enslaved, but those who are doing the enslaving, right? So it is an important time and an important point for us as Americans to acknowledge this celebration of freedom so that we become Americans first, not African Americans, not Irish Americans, not Mexican Americans, or Spanish American, but we are all American first. That is what Juneteenth leads for us to be. Juneteenth was ushered in by the United States colored troops marching through the streets of Galveston, announcing that all are free. They knew they were free already, but to see this example, this exemplary example of black men in uniform with brass buttons that said U.S. and guns on their shoulders was such an exuberating experience that here we are 159 years later still celebrating it. So we want every American to take a moment and reflect on our common bond of freedom. because that's what we have here in America. Freedom is the key thing. And the exercise of that freedom, our pursuit of liberty, is what we all are here in this great country for. I want to thank the United States Colored Troops reenactors. I want to thank the National Miss Juneteenth Scholarship Program for coming here today. I want to thank the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation Board of Directors, the National Park Service. It took a lot to get just this event together, but it shows what unity can do amongst us all. Now, as we go forward through the rest of our celebration on this day, I want everybody to remember, take your time, stay out the heat, get some water, and enjoy yourselves. We have a great show, a great entertainment, some people that are here, the legendary Mr. Michael Hampton, Mr. David Baptiste, Group Brick from Atlanta, Georgia. We have a lot of great things that are happening. Enjoy yourself, but among all, remember that Juneteenth is a celebration of freedom and joint with everybody together. I want to thank you all for coming out and have a great, safe time.
Steve Williams is president of the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation at today's holiday commemoration on the White House ellipse. This is Washington Today. Story from CNN, it's a primary election that took an MRI of the modern Republican Party, revealing toxic backstabbing, desperate lunges for Donald Trump's favor, and the former president's always festering sense of betrayal, and no one knows how it will end. Congressman Bob Good, an arch-conservative whom Trump is trying to bump out of Congress for disloyalty, trails his GOP challenger, State Senator John McGuire, by just over 340 votes after Tuesday's election in Virginia's 5th congressional district, with about 96% of votes in. The fate of Trump's quest for revenge could ironically partly hang on mail-in ballots, a category of votes the presumptive Republican presidential nominee has often decried with his false claims of 2020 election fraud. Trump is angry at Good, the chair of the hardline House Freedom Caucus, because he initially endorsed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in the GOP presidential race. That was the reporting from CNN. John McGuire posted on X Tuesday night, there are still a few votes left to count, but it's clear all paths end with a victory. And when he spoke to his supporters, he did declare victory.
Ladies and gentlemen, the votes are in, and the people have spoken. It is an honor to be your Republican nominee for the 5th Congressional District.
John McGuire in Lynchburg, Virginia on Tuesday night. During that speech, he also thanked former President Trump for his support.
And I've really got to thank somebody that's really a huge part of this win, and we've got to get him back in the White House. Let's thank President Donald J. Trump. What does he say? Huge with a Y, huge. He was a huge part of our win, and I will not forget that. And we need to put America first. I think for too long, I'm a true America First candidate, and I think the best advertisement to get President Trump back in the White House is the last 3 years. We are less safe as a people at the local, state, and federal level. Richmond, Virginia, just a couple hours down the road, murder rates are up 77%. And I think we all know what happened in Campbell County with a 14-year-old girl about a month or so ago. And so we've got a lot of problems, and what I'd like to do is put people in the room and find solutions so we have a better future.
John McGuire, Republican candidate for U.S. Representative, Virginia's 5th congressional district, speaking to supporters Tuesday night. Associated Press says that race against incumbent Congressman Bob Good has 98% reporting, John McGuire with 50.3%, and Bob Good with 49.7%. That amounts to just about 320 votes out of over 62,000 cast. Ballots will continue to be counted on Thursday since Virginia observes the Juneteenth holiday today. Congressman Good posting on X today, this race remains too close to call. We are in a period where the law provides a process for evaluating the accuracy of all the vote totals from Election Day to ensure everyone can have full confidence in the certified results. Provisional ballots and mail-in ballots are also still to be counted. We are asking for full transparency from the officials involved and patience from the people of the 5th District over the coming weeks. As the certification of results is completed, we believe we can still prevail. That post from Congressman Bob Good. And from thehill.com, the winner of the GOP primary will go on to face Democrat Gloria Tinsley Witt in the general election in November for the deeply conservative district. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra spoke today at the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, NALEO, a conference in Las Vegas, talking about what he said was the Biden administration's progress in the Latino community, including immigrants. The secretary mentioned the action that President Biden took yesterday, allowing up to 500,000 undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens to stay in the U.S. while they apply for permanent residency and eventual citizenship.
After years of toil and sacrifice, and we finally roll that 7, and they tell us, wow, you are lucky. You are lucky to have 3 daughters who have gone to some of the best universities, Stanford, and Yale. Wow, you are lucky. No. I worked really hard. My wife, a physician, worked really hard so we could teach our daughters what they could do. But then they earned it. They're the ones that got the grades. They're the ones that earned the acceptance. They're the ones that graduated. They're the ones that passed the bar exam. They're the ones who showed that when they rolled their 7, they earned it. And that's what we want, is for everyone to know we represent folks who have earned their chance in America. And so I say to each and every one of you, I know your luck. I know how hard you work for your luck. And I'm here to tell you on behalf of the president who put more Latinos in a cabinet of a president than any before in the history of America, that he knows your luck, and he knows you have earned it. So it was not luck that yesterday the president said to all those spouses of U.S. citizens who don't have documents, who are undocumented, and have not been able to adjust their status, this president is going to make it possible for you to adjust your status and live in this country with full documentation. The president knows your luck, and that's why he empowered me as Secretary of HHS to say to all those dreamers that you should not be without health insurance. And so today, under President Biden's leadership, they now qualify for Obamacare health care coverage under the marketplaces. This is the president who has put more Latinos to work than any in the history of the country. We are seeing the lowest rates of unemployment for Latinos ever seen before. We are seeing the highest number of Latinos who have their own health insurance, who could then say, my daughter needs to go to the hospital, and say, I'm going to go because I know I won't go bankrupt because I have health insurance. The largest number of Latinos in the history of the country today have health insurance under this president of the United States. And so on and on, I want you to know that we know about your luck. And we know how hard you worked for your luck.
Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra speaking to the conference in Las Vegas of the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, also known as NALEO. Congressman Juan Cisomani, Republican from Arizona, posting today on X, the ongoing crisis at our southern border demands immediate attention. In Congress, I am fighting for the essential resources to support our dedicated Border Patrol agents crack down on the bad actors and secure our border. The congressman included some of his interview on KVOI radio in Tucson.
Listen, we've talked in this show and about my background. I'm an immigrant. I want people to have a shot at the American dream. I want that to happen. Here's the thing: the border is not secure, though. And the little gimmick that he did a couple of weeks ago on that executive order. First of all, he hasn't taken an executive order since the first day in office, when he actually took executive orders to undo border security and cause this crisis. So he does a round of executive orders on his first couple of days in office that create this border crisis. He waits 3 3.5 years to issue another executive order on the same issue. And when he does that, he does this rule about 1,500 to 2,500. But you know what? Those that do the application, the appointments on the app, they're not included in the 2,500. Those you know who else is not included? That is actually pretty dangerous. Minors are not included in the 2,500. So when you don't include minors in the 2,500 threshold to stop the flow at the border, then that creates a business plan for the cartels. And actually, trafficking minors becomes more of a business model for them because they're not counted towards that number. So in essence, you kind of set it up so that minors are even more vulnerable now, or adults trying to find minors to be able to cross. So again, falls way short of what anything that should have been done. He touted it as a border security measure, executive order. It's done nothing for it. The numbers prove it that there's nothing positive happening from this. And matter of fact, the 2,500 threshold hasn't been reached. You know why? Because of all the exceptions to what qualifies for the 2,500 people that are in there. The list is longer than anybody would know. So that's an issue there.
Congressman Juan Cismani, Republican from Arizona, on KVOI radio in Tucson. The House of Representatives is not in session in Washington this week. Another article from The Hill. The Senate on Tuesday passed a package aimed at bolstering the nation's nuclear power sector, sending it to President Biden's desk. The vote was 88-2. Senators Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, and Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, opposed the measure. While a White House spokesperson did not respond to questions about whether Biden will sign the bill, National Climate Advisor Ali Zaidi appeared to post on the social media platform X in support of the legislation Tuesday. The nuclear package was combined with another bill that reauthorizes the U.S. Fire Administration and grant programs for firefighters, which will also go to the president's desk. Legislation is expected to speed up the timeline for licensing new nuclear reactors and cut fees that companies have to pay to do so. It also requires the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to put together a report that considers ways to simplify and shorten the environmental review process. That was from The Hill. Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Republican from West Virginia, spoke in favor of the bill on the Senate floor on Tuesday.
Today, nuclear power provides about 20% of our nation's electricity. Importantly, it's emissions-free electricity that is 24/7, 365 days a year. Not only is it necessary to continue developing and deploying more nuclear energy reactors from an energy and environmental standpoint, it is also vital to our national security, and it's good for the economy. So it was important for us as lawmakers to prepare to meet the increased demand, predicted to be twice the demand, with policies that encourage investment and deployment of nuclear technologies right here on our shores. The Advance Act does just that and preserves the United States as the destination for innovation and expansion, ensuring that we are what we should be, which is the global leader for decades to come. Here are just a few of the ways that our bill benefits America's energy, economic, and environmental future. The Advance Act reduces regulatory costs for companies seeking to license advanced reactor technologies. It requires the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to establish a regulatory roadmap to license new nuclear facilities on brownfield sites, something that would be very important to my state of West Virginia. It directs the NRC to update its mission statement to reflect the beneficial uses of nuclear technology and establish a licensing structure to support an efficient, timely, and predictable regulatory review. It establishes an initiative to more quickly license advanced nuclear fuels that are both safer and more economic. And it provides the NRC new tools to hire and retain highly qualified staff to enable the licensing of advanced reactors.
Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Republican from West Virginia, on the Senate floor on Tuesday. Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, was one of the two no votes against this bill when it passed. Senator Markey said on the Senate floor on Tuesday that he supports the portion that reauthorizes the U.S. Fire Administration and grant programs for firefighters, but opposes adding the nuclear power bill to the package.
On the coattails of this non-controversial bill to protect our heroes, our colleagues in the House tacked on a dangerous, additional 90-page package of provisions that merged the Senate's Advance Act and the House's Atomic Energy Advancement Act. Well, because of this airdrop provision into the fire bill, I will be opposing final passage of this bill. Well, let me go now to what is the Advance Act, and why would they try to attach it to something that is absolutely essential? Why would they not just bring it out, try to have a big debate on it? Well, I'll tell you why. The original version of the Advance Act, which I voted against in the committee, was weakened further and watered down further in negotiations with the House. The new language attempts to water down the duties of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It puts communities on the back burner, and it dilutes existing protocols that keep our nation safe from the threat of nuclear war. That's what we're talking about today, nuclear war. It puts promotion over protection and corporate profits over community cleanup. Notably, the provisions from the Senate bill that would have provided a much-needed $225 million for communities affected by nuclear closures and $100 million to clean up contaminated tribal communities are not in the legislation anymore, as it came back from the House of Representatives. But the provisions to prop up the nuclear industry, they remain.
Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, on the Senate floor on Tuesday before the vote, 88-2, to pass this bill and send it to President Biden. Wall Street today, the Dow up 56, NASDAQ up 5, S&P up 13. Washington today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, brings you a recap of the day's most important events. Find out what happened on Capitol Hill, the White House, and with policymakers, all delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at cspan.org/connect.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. It's free and wherever you find your podcasts. Story from Time magazine. Former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi accused China of trying to erase Tibetan culture following her high-profile meeting with the Dalai Lama at his home in northern India Wednesday, a visit condemned by Beijing. Pelosi was joined on the trip by a bipartisan delegation led by Michael McCaul, the Republican chair of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. The group also met with officials from Tibet's government in exile. Pelosi said a bill recently passed in Congress strengthening U.S. support to Tibet sends a strong message to China. China is, quote, trying to erase the culture, reduce the use of the language, Pelosi said during a public ceremony Wednesday. They're trying something that we cannot let them get away with. That was from Time magazine. Here is part of Congresswoman Pelosi's remarks criticizing the Chinese President Xi Jinping.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama, with his message of knowledge and tradition and compassion and purity of soul and love, he will live a long time and his legacy will live forever. But to you, President of China, you'll be gone and nobody will give you credit for anything. So in that spirit now the Dalai Lama would not approve of my saying that. When I criticize the Chinese government, he says, let's pray for Nancy to rid her of her negative attitudes. But I think I hope he will indulge me today to say that change is on the way. As our colleagues have said, hope springs from faith, and the faith of the Tibetan people in the goodness of others is what is going to make all the difference.
Former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, meeting with the Dalai Lama in India, part of a larger congressional delegation. That clip was posted by the Indian Express. The Dalai Lama's office released video of the delegation's meeting and some of the remarks by the members. Here is Michael McCall, Republican from Texas, chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Your Holiness, it's and I speak for all the members. That it is such an honor to be in the presence of such a great spiritual leader. And through all the adversity that you have faced, you've maintained a peace of mind, compassion, forgiveness to your enemies. I saw the studies of the Tibetan monk's brain. Where science actually proves that the meditation can lower the conflict within the brain. So I need to sign up for yoga classes. And let me just say that, our committee, Foreign Affairs, we deal with issues of war and peace as you've dealt with in your life. So you are an inspiration in terms of how we can use our mind, both reason and compassion, to deal with these problems in the world.
Congressman Michael McCall, Republican from Texas, chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, meeting with the Dalai Lama in India, part of a delegation from the U.S. Congress. More from the Time magazine article, Beijing had warned the U.S. lawmakers against the meeting, urging the U.S. in remarks on Tuesday to, quote, see clearly the anti-China separatism nature of the Dalai Lama and his followers. China considers the Dalai Lama a separatist for his commitment to limited autonomy for the region. China annexed Tibet in the 1950s, with the Dalai Lama and other monks fleeing to India 9 years later, where they live as refugees and have set up a government in exile. That was from Time magazine. From Al Jazeera, the Israeli military's deliberate use of heavy weapons in the Gaza Strip has been an intentional and direct attack on the civilian population. A new report by the United Nations-backed Independent Commission has found. Navi Pillay, chairperson of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, said on Wednesday that Israel has committed crimes against humanity, forced starvation, extermination, murder, and inhuman and cruel treatment of Palestinians. She also accused Palestinian groups of war crimes. That reporting from Al Jazeera. Here is Navi Pillay and the commission members presenting their report to the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva.
In relation to Israel's military operations and attacks in Gaza from 7th October, we conclude that Israeli authorities are responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and violations of international humanitarian and human rights law, including extermination, intentionally directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects, murder or willful killing, using starvation as a method of war, forcible transfer, gender persecution targeting Palestinian men and boys, sexual and gender-based violence amounting to torture, and cruel or inhuman treatment. Israel's total siege of the Gaza Strip has weaponized the provision of life-sustaining necessities for strategic and political gains, including through cutting off supplies of water, food, electricity, fuel, and other essential supplies, including humanitarian assistance. It constitutes collective punishment, disproportionately impacting pregnant women and persons with disabilities, and is causing grave harm to children, including starvation-related deaths. We found that the immense numbers of civilian casualties in Gaza and widespread destruction of civilian objects and infrastructure were the inevitable result of an intentional strategy to cause maximum damage, disregarding the legal obligations of distinction, proportionality, and adequate precautions. Israel also forcibly transferred almost the entire population into small enclosures that are unsafe and uninhabitable. The deliberate use of heavy weapons with large destructive capacity in densely populated areas constitutes an intentional and direct attack on the civilian population.
Navi Pillay, chair of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, speaking at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, on the report issued today. Eylon Levy was Israel's government spokesperson from the start of the Israel-Hamas war last October until March of this year. He is now co-founder of a group called Israel Citizen Spokespersons and regularly posts videos about the war. Today, he talked about the battle in Rafah in southern Gaza.
Do you remember the All Eyes on Rafah campaign? It sure seems to have died down. Why is that? Is nobody looking at Rafah anymore? Well, I'm looking at Rafah, and I would love all eyes to be on Rafah. Share that graphic on social media, please do. The whole world should see what the IDF is finding in Rafah. Because there is almost no home in Rafah without a terror tunnels. Terror tunnels connect the homes in Rafah. The terror tunnels in Rafah are how Hamas terrorists move underground undetected. Hamas also smashes holes in walls in houses in Rafah to move around from house to house without being detected. In just the past few days, the IDF found 17 terror tunnels under the city of Rafah. At least 50 smuggling tunnels have been discovered on the Gaza-Egypt border. Half of them are major tunnels. Think of a major tunnel as an underground highway. Cement walls, lights, ventilation, telephone cables, and living quarters. Every time the IDF destroys a terror tunnel, Hamas terrorists have fewer places to hide. The IDF has said that 2 of Hamas's 4 battalions in Rafah are completely dismantled, and the other 2 battalions are degraded. Israel is continuing operations to completely dismantle Hamas's military capabilities so it can never do October 7th again or terrorize Israeli communities with rocket fire, and to keep up military pressure to get all the hostages back. And that's why Israel must act in Rafah, and is acting in Rafah despite international pressure. To destroy Hamas terrorists' hiding places, to block their smuggling routes, to look for hostages, and to keep Israelis safe from the terror army promising to do October 7th again and again until our country is destroyed and all of us are dead.
Eylon Levy, former Israeli government spokesperson, in an online video today. Story from AFP. Hezbollah on Wednesday said all of Israel would not be spared in the event of war after Israel said it had approved a plan for a Lebanon offensive, stoking fears that the Gaza war will spread. The Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah said no place in Israel would be spared our rockets. In a televised address broadcast amid spiraling tensions across the Israel-Lebanon border, Nasrallah, whose powerful Iran-backed group has exchanged nearly daily fire with Israel since its ally Hamas's October 7th attack, also threatened the nearby island nation of Cyprus if it opened its airports or bases to Israel, quote, to target Lebanon. That was from AFP. Also, Amos Hochstein, a senior advisor to U.S. President Joe Biden, went back to Israel today after meeting in Lebanon earlier this week. Story from Associated Press. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un signed an agreement Wednesday that pledges mutual aid if either country faces aggression, a strategic pact that comes as both face escalating standoffs with the West. Details of the deal were not immediately clear, but it could mark the strongest connection between Moscow and Pyongyang since the end of the Cold War. Both leaders described it as a major upgrade in their relations, covering security, trade, investment, cultural, and humanitarian ties. That was from AP. And finally, from ABC News, Willie Mays, widely considered to be one of the greatest baseball players in the history of the game, has died at age 93 from From his start in the Negro Leagues with the Birmingham Black Barons to winning Rookie of the Year with the New York Giants in 1951 and through 24 All-Star Game appearances, including one in his final season, Mays dazzled fans with his combination of power, speed, and joy on the field. That was from ABC News. In 2015, then President Barack Obama presented Willie Mays with the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
We don't have time to list all of Willie Mays' statistics. 660 home runs, 302 lifetime batting average. The list goes on and on. I won't describe that miracle grab at the Polo Grounds either, because Willie says that wasn't even his best catch. I will say this, we have never seen an all-around five-tool player quite like Willie before, and we haven't seen one since. He could throw and he could field, hit for contact and for power, and of course he was so fast he could barely keep a hat on his head. On top of that, Willie also served our country, and his quiet example, while excelling on one of America's biggest stages, helped carry forward the banner of civil rights. A few years ago, Willie rode with me on Air Force One. I told him then what I'll tell all of you now. It's because of giants like Willie that someone like me could even think about running for president.
From C-SPAN's video library, former President Barack Obama at a White House ceremony in 2015 awarding the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Willie Mays and others. Willie Mays has passed away at the age of 93. Plenty of members of Congress paying tribute. Adriano Espaillat, Democrat from New York, posting on X, Willie Mays will forever be remembered as an icon, a legend, and one of the greatest all-around baseball players of all time. His impact is enduring, and may his legacy continue to inspire players for generations to follow. And from Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican from Alabama, not only was Willie Mays a baseball legend, but he was a great American and a great Alabamian. His career with the Birmingham Black Barons and the San Francisco Giants has been inspirational for millions. My prayers go out to the Mays family. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter word for word, and you'll have the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a great night.